The Southeastern United States rarely makes the shortlist when people talk about bikepacking destinations, but hidden beneath the radar lies a vast network of unpaved roads, thousands of miles of forgotten byways and forest corridors, waiting to be explored. I had never ventured into this corner of the country, so when a friend began mapping an ambitious off-road bikepacking route across the Southern US, I knew I had to be a part of it. I set out to be the first to ride the eastern leg of this route, a 1,600-mile journey from Texarkana, straddling the Texas-Arkansas border, all the way to Jacksonville, Florida. This ride wasn't just about testing the trail. It was part of a larger dream to cross every state in the country by bike. And with this ride, I would add 6 more to the list: Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. What followed was a ride through forgotten landscapes, quiet towns, and the deep pulse of the American South, a journey of solitude, grit, and discovery. This was more than a test ride. It was a journey through 6 states, thousands of stories, and a landscape that rarely gets the spotlight. Every pedal stroke was a step toward discovery. Day 1 was a 128-mile ride from Texarkana to Minden, Louisiana. Texarkana is a town split between 2 states, where the lines on the map blur and the road stretches east into the unknown. I rolled out early in the morning, air heavy with anticipation and the scent of pine. The route led me through quiet back roads and forgotten farmland, traversing the southwest corner of Arkansas before dipping into Louisiana. It was a day of transition, from the familiar into the deep south, where the terrain softened and the accents changed. Day 2 was another big day with 109 miles from Minden to Winfield. The route ahead would take me deeper into Louisiana, into the heart of pine country, where the roads narrow and the world slows down. The terrain shifted subtly, long stretches of gravel gave way to red clay and shaded forest lanes. I passed through small towns and forgotten crossroads, each with its own rhythm, its own story. The air was thick with humidity and the scent of magnolia, and every mile felt like a step further into the South's quiet soul. Day 3 took me 119 miles from Winfield to the forgotten town of Jonesville. The route unfolded like a quiet hymn, winding through Forest Service roads, sleepy hollows, and gravel dikes scarred by the passage of off-road vehicles. Wildlife stirred in the underbrush, and the shaded canopy gradually gave way to the wide-open landscapes and an endless expanse of blue sky. This was rural Louisiana at its most intimate. No billboards, no traffic, just the rhythm of the land and the steady cadence of my breath. I passed through tiny communities where front porches still held stories and the air carried the scent of rain-soaked earth. By the time I reached Jonesville late that night, the ride had already etched itself into memory. It wasn't just the distance that defined it. It was the stillness, the solitude, and the quiet sense of passing through a place rarely touched by travelers on 2 wheels. And let's not forget the deep gravel and those endless washboards, a constant reminder that beauty often comes with a bit of a bite. The 4th day was 102 miles from Jonesville to New Roads. The route traced levees and bayous winding through farmland and floodplain. It was a day of water, crossing bridges, skirting swamps, and feeling the pulse of the river country. As I approached New Roads, the scenery shifted. Spanish moss hung from trees, and the architecture hinted at Creole influence. The town itself sat graciously on the banks of False River, a crescent-shaped oxbow lake that shimmered into the late afternoon light. It felt like arriving at a place with deep roots and slow rhythms. Day 5 was 98 miles from New Roads to Amite City. Leaving New Roads meant crossing the Mississippi River, a symbolic moment in any journey. The bridge was long and exposed, the wind whipping across the water as I pedaled east into the heart of Louisiana. The terrain flattened, and the roads again turned to gravel, cutting through sugarcane fields and pine groves. Day 6 was a shorter day with just 67 miles from Amite City to Bogalusa. It was the last stop in Louisiana, and I felt like this land was offering a final farewell before crossing into Mississippi. I rode through dense pine forests and quiet back roads, the route threading through rural parishes and forgotten logging towns. Day 7, I crossed into Mississippi, traveling 118 miles from Bogalusa to Wiggins. Mississippi felt like entering a new chapter. Real or imagined, the roads grew rougher, the forests thicker, and the sense of isolation deeper. I passed through DeSoto National Forest, where the canopy closed overhead and the gravel turned to sand in places, slowing progress and demanding focus. Welcome to Mississippi. Oh, interstate with no shoulder, so I'm just bushwhacking through the debris on the side of the road and tall grass and whatnot. There is no way I'm riding with semi-trucks going 80 miles an hour. My time in Mississippi was limited, with day 8 being my only full day in the Magnolia State. This day took me 118 miles from Wiggins to Waynesboro. This day was long and remote, with few towns and fewer services. The route carved through forest land and hunting territory. It was a day of solitude. No traffic, no distractions, just the sound of tires on dirt and birdsong in the trees. This was the kind of day that reminded me why I ride, for the quiet, the challenge, and the moments of unexpected grace. Day 9 was 72 miles from Waynesboro to Thomasville in Alabama. I crossed into Alabama without fanfare, no signs, no markings, just a quiet shift in the landscape. Yet Alabama made its presence known with rolling hills and roads of deep red clay. Crossing into a new state always brings a surge of energy, and Alabama felt like a fresh canvas. Sweet home Alabama. I hate it when there's no sign telling you welcome to the next state. That's a ceremonious event, but it's less ceremonious when there's no sign. If I didn't mark it on my bike computer, I would never know that I was in Alabama. But I'm there. I made it. Day 10 was a perfect century ride with 100 miles between Thomasville and Greenville. This was a day of elevation, gentle climbs and sweeping descents through the Alabama countryside. The route passed through pecan groves and cattle pastures with long stretches of quiet road that invited reflection. I found myself thinking less about the miles and more about the journey itself. Greenville wasn't part of the original route, but I made the detour, chasing a hotel room, a hot meal, and the chance to stock up for the miles ahead. Sometimes you have to improvise. Rerouting on the fly is always a gamble, but this time the risk paid off. The roads were rough, navigation uncertain, yet the detour delivered. Challenging terrain, quiet roads, and just enough beauty to keep the spirit lifted. Day 11 took me 72 miles from Greenville to Troy. And yes, I had to stop at my namesake. The route followed old farm roads and tree-lined highways with occasional glimpses of deer grazing and hawks overhead. It was a good day, simple, steady, and full of heart. And let's be honest, there's something undeniably poetic about arriving in a town that shares your name, even if it makes you work for it. Day 12 took me to Georgia as I rode 105 miles from Troy to Blakely. Crossing into Georgia felt like entering the final stretch. The roads grew smoother, the towns more frequent, and the landscape more cultivated. I passed through peanut fields and pecan orchards, the scent of harvest in the air. Georgia was unfolding with grace, and I could feel the momentum building. The end was near, but the journey still had stories to tell. All done with Alabama. Georgia state line right here. After Georgia, it's one more, I have Florida, and I'm done. Day 13 took me 116 miles from Blakely to Thomasville for the last full day in Georgia. This was one of the most scenic days, winding through southern Georgia's pastoral beauty with oak-lined roads and golden fields stretching to the horizon. The route dipped into small towns and historic districts, each with its own charm. Day 14 was another state. I rode 103 miles from Thomasville to Live Oak in Florida. Florida greeted me with open skies, flat terrain, and deep sand. Welcome to the Sunshine State. I crossed the state line with a sense of triumph, the final state on the journey and the beginning of the end. Every mile now felt like a countdown, each town a marker on the road to completion. Day 15, the penultimate day, was long and reflective, with 103 miles from Live Oak to Callahan. I rode through pine forests and endless sandy stretches, the route threading through northern Florida's quiet backroads. The sun was high, the air warm, and the sense of nearing the finish line was palpable. The journey had taken me through 15 days of grit, grace, and growth, and tomorrow it would culminate at the Atlantic. The final day was just 75 miles from Callahan to Jacksonville. This day featured a bit of a victory loop as I wanted to make sure I hit the Atlantic coast before looping back to the Jacksonville airport. The day began with a mix of anticipation and nostalgia. Long sandy stretches to start the day made sure I remembered all the challenges from the previous days. I rode east towards the coast, the terrain flattening and traffic increasing. The route led me through suburban sprawl and coastal marshes, each mile bringing me closer to the ocean. The Atlantic appeared like a beacon, the end of the line, the edge of the continent. I reached the Atlantic with salt in the air and sand beneath my tires. Alright, this is it. Officially out of land. Got the Atlantic right here. Now just to touch the ocean. Alright, we've done it. Now for a 45-mile victory lap to the airport. 16 days, 6 states, and 1,600 miles behind me. The ride was over, but the story would live on in the roads I traveled, the people I met, and the quiet moments that stitched it all together.